Hello, my fellow Singaporeans. My name is Wendy Loh, and I'm the candidate from Progress Singapore Party contesting in Tanjong Pagar GRC. On 31st December 2018, I witnessed a suicide. Someone jumped. Someone did not feel he had enough reason to make it to the 1st of January. I searched online to find a report on this suicide. I wanted to know why. Was it a case of bankruptcy, a failed romance, or undetected depression? But there was no why. No report to be found. It was just another statistic. In July 2019, Straits Times had reported that suicides in Singapore rose by 10% compared with the year before, and suicides amongst boys aged 10 to 19 were at a record high. How did we get here? I felt deeply that we have fundamentally and thoroughly failed as a people. But at what point did we lose our way? Why our current 4G cannot be representative of the people? What do you do when you lose your way on the road? In the olden days, you would take out your dusty copy of road map. In modern times, you blame on the GPS and try to reset your direction. Our 4G tells us they have this road map, this economic GPS. They try to convince us that they have the best drivers in the nation. They are asking for a strong mandate to continue driving. This is despite the ongoing COVID-19 crisis. And this is the starting point of everything that is wrong with the current government when it insists on calling for a COVID election. The government has stopped caring for the people of this country, whether local or foreigners. 99 election events around the world as of early June were postponed, but the government had insisted on getting people out with the risk of elderly and the vulnerable suffering. It no longer cares for the safety of its passenger so long as it wins. It pretends to speed to avoid a constitutional road hump when it is really jumping over a cliff to get to the finishing point faster. And cliff jumping is dangerous, but if they are really skilled drivers, they can help to navigate this. But they are not. Why is that so? This is the fallacy of the practiced meritocracy, which is based on an extremely narrow criteria, and that is of paper qualifications. The people who get to repair, maintain, and drive this car are largely determined by the qualifications from when they graduated from elite schools. Others are direct imports from military and civil service. Some are good, but many lack practical experience and lead to breakdown of parts. This is made worse given the many external crises which the driver has shown itself to lack capability in handling, like the US-China trade wars or the COVID outbreak amongst dormitory workers. Promotion to driver's seat is largely based on yes-manship, people who already agree with the current driver and will not question even when they know the leaders are lost. Not because these team members are not smart, but because it will be too expensive for them personally to disagree. Hence, engines are faulty and regularly break down. They get their relatives to repair, which makes things only worse because their family may not even be qualified mechanics. Or they may subcontractor to cheaper mechanics with poor supervision. This results in multiple accidents, but our economic cars are only sprayed with flashier coats of paint to distract the crowd from seeing the faults. Sometimes they drive you to see big, water-wasting man-made waterfalls when they are really just lost. Okay, so this car is not perfect and the drivers still have driving manuals handed down by their forefathers which they recite from teleprompters. They convince you they should continue since they have set up committees to study and come up with more varieties of GPS. However, there are problems. First, the engine is faulty and there is no real power. It needs to be pushed by more and more Singaporeans working longer hours. Second, Singaporeans are displaced at the shortest notice once there is cheaper foreign labor. Many are left struggling, unemployed or underemployed, depressed and scraping the bottom of the economic barrel. Third, the driver refuses to accept they are wrong when there is any fault. They make statements like, "I do not know of anyone who has asked me to apologize." Or they will blame everyone else downstream but themselves. Fourth, the few times there are any profitable innovation to the engine, the driver uses its resources to replicate or get a cheaper third party to copy. This leaves little incentive for the mechanic to come up with new designs. The few mechanics like our SMEs who are struggling to make better designs, they get burdened with increasing business costs and rental. These are largely controlled by the driver because he also happens to own all the land in the country. So the mechanics are left with little choice but to keep wages low for business survival. So my dear fellow Singaporeans, the problem is not that we lack an economic GPS or multiple committees studying the future roadmap. The problem is that we have a car that is falling apart, pushed along by Singaporeans who are struggling, unmotivated, and depressed, and sometimes suicidal. The car is incapable of powering up because the driver himself suppresses innovation. And the only reason why this car has been increasing in value is because buyers, some whom are brought in from foreign lands, have been persuaded to buy and sell the car with each new coat of paint. So the value gets pushed up artificially. But it remains the same old car, the same neon pink car with a crumbling economic engine. So installing the most advanced GPS and transformative roadmaps in a flashy car that is on the verge of failing does not solve the problem. What does? The Progress Singapore Party has devised a comprehensive 5-point manifesto. Let me elaborate and share from my perspective. Without stating the obvious, we need experienced mechanics to repair our economic and social engine, not those who come as military men after a global surge. Reform should come at two levels. First, with our parliamentarians, and second, with our civil servants. Starting with this election, we need SME owners, innovators, teachers, professionals, doctors, media writers, artists, and more to become our future MPs. We need everyone to step forward, to be brave, be proud, and be ready to make a difference for Singapore. The civil service also needs to be reformed. Merit should not be based on the narrow criteria of paper qualifications alone. It can be the starting point, but it cannot be the end. The civil service needs to be reformed with a skills-based assessment for promotion and salary increments. This bureaucratic reform has implications for 231,000 public servants and can help enhance productivity and motivation for an upwardly innovative civil service. The next immediate step is social security. The four budgets had provided relief, but there remain gaps because of the complicated criteria which does not provide timely remedy. Why can't we have simpler and more timely solutions. A recent study shows that 2 in 3 working Singaporeans do not have savings to last them beyond 6 months. This was headlined in a Straits Times article from an OCBC survey. I had published another article which suggests that joblessness does not affect everyone equally. Many do not even have the luxury of a 6-month wait. Instead of complicated budgets and schemes, why can't our fellow Singaporeans look towards their CPF for immediate relief? CPF should provide for more than retirement planning. We should broaden the purpose of CPF and allow Singaporeans who are retrenched or unemployed to have access to their own monies to tide over personal crisis. A resident I had spoken with suggested releasing the yearly interest payout from their CPF from the age of 55 to 65 to provide for household expenses as they age. This merits consideration, especially with the rising cost of living. In times of recession, Singaporeans should also be allowed to release of an amount equivalent to a minimal living wage. After all, monies in the CPF belongs to the people. These sums can be repaid back to their CPF account without interest when they are found gainful employment with the support of state-appointed job agencies. And how should we assess what is a minimal living wage? We should urgently commission a detailed and independent study on minimal living wage. With the number for a minimal living wage, we can then better review the household income criteria that cuts across so many of our governmental and public relief sectors. We should over time also work with employers and agencies to implement a minimal living wage to alleviate our low-wage workers. Beyond that, we should also establish a national database on our invisible poor to make the invisible visible. This falls into 2 broad categories: the homeless and the Singaporeans living in your 3 to 5 bedroom HDBs but are struggling to meet their daily living expenses. This should be our first line of reference to assess how we can provide timely and relevant assistance in times of crisis. No Singaporean should be left sleeping on the streets, and no Singaporean should be left behind. Next, jobs creation for Singaporeans is critical. Let's examine this for young graduates and PMAPs. One of the key reasons why young graduates find it hard to gain employment in times of crisis is because they are seen more as liability, requiring training with salaries. This mindset should be shifted. Many millennials are digital natives. By the time they graduate, they would averagely have more social media connections than their potential bosses in their 40s and 50s. Companies should start having trainees build out their business and digital marketing as part of their work requirement. Graduates can help expand the profit pie. In turn, they can and should be rewarded with commission or incentives to breach the lower wages of traineeships or contract work. The state can also play a role by making compulsory business and digital marketing courses for all IT and tertiary graduates. More lecturing roles for marketing can in turn be created and offer opportunities for PMAPs who may have excelled in marketing across a number of industries. This can create a win-win-win solution. To provide on skill sets and entrepreneurship, Singapore should be the ASEAN regional hub for corporate universities. Industry, tech and startup leaders can set the curriculum and close the gap between market needs and graduate skill sets. This will address unmet demands. For example, recently it was reported that 60,000 Infocom jobs are available in the next 3 years, but we can barely meet this need with only 2,800 Infocom graduates each year. An industry-driven curricula will mitigate the excuse to import more foreign talents. A Singaporean prioritized corporate university entry will also give our young ones an edge over our neighbours. The vision for our future entrepreneurs is therefore built on the twin pillars of innovation and entrepreneurship in its educational policies. It is when our young Singaporeans are at the helm of breakthrough technologies that we can maintain our edge on the global stage. Next, on PMAPs. A lot of our saving of PMAP jobs had been focused on reducing foreign talent, retraining, and skills transfer from foreign talents with specialist knowledge. This is important. However, in an increasingly digitized and global economy, our competitors will, however, not just be incoming foreign talents. It will be everyone who has access to the internet. How do we address this? With the fourth industrial revolution, we need to rethink and anchor Singapore in our core competencies and what is essential. Change will be the only constant, and amidst the changes, we should anchor retraining of PMAPs and build up core competencies in what is basic and unchanging to human needs despite the times to come. This should involve the marrying of technology, AI, and robotics with food, water, housing, education, communication, and healthcare. The COVID-19 has helped us see clearly what is essential to human existence and are industries that will triumph the worst crisis. We need to be the leaders in these fields which are unchanging. For sustainable growth, we need to look beyond a linear 10 million population projection. Straining our resources with overpopulation is not the way forward. Instead, we should look towards a collaborative growth with ASEAN and beyond. ASEAN is projected to be the world's fourth largest economy by 2030. Our immediate neighbours, Malaysia and Indonesia, present our Malay community with unlimited opportunities for growth, especially with their common culture and language. We should shift our narrative with our Malay brothers and sisters from one of help and relief to one of aspiration and growth. Beyond ASEAN, our new citizens can also be our economic ambassadors, connecting Singaporean businesses with new economies in Asia Pacific, China, India, and Russia. New citizens who have become Singaporeans are part of us. Together, we can grow to greater heights. As our elderly Singaporeans live longer lives, policy will be put in place at the earliest stages so that Singaporeans can live on sustainable income and returns from CPF, retire with dignity, and have the assurance of affordable healthcare. Our focus will be on preventive and holistic healthcare. We should address mental well-being like any other ordinary illness. Zero suicide should be a national goal. Singapore can be the next wellness hub in Asia, and spending from foreign wellness visitors can be used to cross-subsidize healthcare and facilities for our aging population without the burden of GST increase. Fundamentally, the Progress Singapore Party's push for transparency, independence, and accountability does not just make for good politics. It makes for good business. Investors have been drawn to Singapore for its strong governance and forward-thinking policies from the era of the late Mr. Lee Kuan Yew. And the late Mr. Lee Kuan Yew has once said, "If you're going to lower me into the grave and I feel something is wrong, I will get up." His principles are now revived through Dr. Tanjong, an old guard from Generation 1 leadership. His spirit, more importantly, is revived through his son, Mr. Lee Hsien Loong's endorsement of the Progress Singapore Party. But back to our earlier story. The incumbents are trying to convince you that they have the most advanced economic GPS. However, what they are not highlighting is that the car engine is already crumbling and the drivers, led by ex-generals and civil servants, do not always know the way. My fellow Singaporeans, you do not want to end up in an economic desert storm with a failed car engine. Sugar-coated roadmaps will not help. Turn back before it is too late, because you deserve better.